In late 90s, I think, a friend and I, Ambrose, a good buddy of mine, we kind of grew up talking about guitars and stuff together, and he was in the market for a new amp. And anyway, we spent one winter going all over the country trying different amps, and there was one wet Saturday afternoon that we went to Rose Morris and tried a matchless Lightning 15, and that was kind of amazing to me, that you could have a sound like that coming out of an amp. And then so that sort of just sat in my mind and my subconscious and whirled around, and that was before I was really involved in any electronics. And then I started working at Mutronics and had access to a soldering iron and actually was able to solder. And I thought, well, maybe I'll try and make an AC30, because I thought that's what I wanted. But then I was on Pro Audio DIY forums, and a guy said to me, well, if you want to make a guitar amp, then just buy an old 5-valve radio and I can kind of tell you how to mod that so that it becomes a guitar amp. So we had two early wins. The first one was that James, who you've not met yet, my colleague, he used to drink in the same pub as a guy who was tech for AC/DC, and they had a studio just down the road from the pub. So they got talking, and James said, oh, well, you know, Steve's been working on this amp, could you get it to the Youngs? And he was like, yeah, just get something to me. And so we dropped an amp and a cab off, and Angus absolutely loved it. So, and at that point I found out I'd gone to see some friends in El Paso, so I got this email like, oh, Angus and Malcolm really love it. And I thought, that, you know, that's it, I can retire. And I also thought that was, you know, my order book was just going to fill up and I was going to explode. And it didn't kind of happen like that. And at that point we were developing a compressor with Mutronics, and so I got in touch with Al Mulder and said, can I drop this compressor to you to have a check out? And also, I've been messing around with guitar amps, shall I bring that? And he was like, yeah, fine. I think that was a Thursday. And in those days, I used to take Friday off and do music. And I got this text message from Al on Friday saying, I haven't tried the compressor, but the amp's absolutely amazing, I want to buy one. And that was just astounding. So yeah, the Matchless being that touchstone, that was a kind of, it was a bit mercurial, that thing, because I never bought a Lightning 15, and from the point that I listened to it, I don't think I ever listened to one in isolation again. I mean, I probably listened to them on records, but never had one to play with and see how it responded. And so the sound that I heard on that day went into my mind, and obviously, as happens, and that's what rose-tinted spectacles are, you know, it just gets better and better and better and further removed from the reality of it every time you recall it. And so when I was working on amps trying to develop the sound and hone the sound, I was grasping towards this thing which didn't exist in reality. But I knew how it made me feel when I played it, and so that's sort of what I was leading towards. That's what was leading me onward. And so these circuits are not really based on anything now. It's quite difficult to, if you've always tried to make things which match up to something else, you're kind of tied to that. Whereas if you're not trying to be the same as something else, you can just free yourself to be good. objectively good. So rather than in comparison to something else. So with the pedals, the first one obviously was the Big Trees. That was supposed to be, so the first amp that I designed was the Little Chopper, and that's a low wattage amp. It was only ever supposed to be used in the studio. And so people were starting to use them in the studio and then wanting to use them live. And this was sort of before everyone had in-ear monitors, and it was like, well, I need loads of volume from my amp, and a 7-watt amp is not competing with a drummer. And so I thought, okay, well, it would be really cool if I could make an amp which was low wattage, so you could use it in the studio, but you could also use it as a pedal. And so, do you know what? It took so long to get the Big Trees to the point that it's at now, or to the point that it was when I released it. The idea was to make it more affordable or less face-meltingly expensive, and so I made constraints to myself, whereas with the Little Chopper I didn't so much. I just used whatever components made it sound the best, and so I suppose the Big Trees, it evolved over about a few years, and I got completely fed up with it repeatedly and slung it in the corner when I got to what seemed like a bit of an impasse. And James and I both had goes at designing the circuit board and changing different, like the load on there and output transformer and all that kind of stuff. And it was, again, because I wasn't trying to make anything else, it wasn't supposed to be the best ever version of this thing that you've heard. It was allowed to be its own thing, and because of the process that I'd gone through with the Little Chopper, I sort of trusted my ears to be a decent reference for what sounded objectively good rather than just subjectively good. But in terms of what does it start with, an idea for something that might be useful, because that's really, so the Little Chopper started from a friend of mine had an AC30, wanted to record it at home, liked it when it was breaking up. This was before what do you call them, low thing, like attenuator things, and he just like, you should make something that you can record at home, that you can kind of drive the output and record it at home that will sound really good. And so that's how the Little Chopper came out. The Big Trees came out of, I need something that I can take on tour with me. So initially the Big Trees was supposed to be a Little Chopper which you could also use as a pedal, but then obviously it changed into its own thing. And you can, I think all of the stuff that I make sounds like it's an Audio Kitchen thing, and I think that's because my ears like a certain sound, or certain characteristics in sound. They don't necessarily have to be all the same tonally, but there are certain characteristics of the sound which are common to all of the things that I make. What is my proudest moment? In terms of Audio Kitchen, that's really hard. As a cop-out answer, I would say every time someone buys something and they email back saying, I'm having so much fun with this, thanks so much, regardless of, whether they're famous or not. Just the fact that something that I've made is a tool which is, like, I love tools, and I love well-made tools that make jobs easier. And instruments and amplifiers and things are absolutely tools, and yes, there's an emotional kind of attachment to it, but then, if you get into super hi-fi Japanese saws and all that kind of stuff. It's a similar thing, you know. It's an emotional thing as well as just mechanically being able to do the job. And knowing that I've created a tool that has made someone's work day, in inverted commas, more fun and enjoyable, that is always a proud moment for me. In terms of kind of mountaintop experiences, certainly seeing Ed O'Brien use the big choppers in Manchester in 2018, I think it was. I didn't quite cry, but that was only because I was desperately trying not to look like a baby in front of 50,000 people. That was an amazing moment, and I had been wanting to, like, from when the year dot of Audio Kitchen, I had really wanted to get some amps to Radiohead, and tried various different routes in, and just never happened. And then when it did happen, it was not through any kind of machinations on my part. It was just enough people had heard of me, and all the stars aligned, and you know, I was attacked from two different angles on that. And then I had the right thing at the right time, and it kind of worked out. And so yeah, that was pretty amazing. Another really great moment was, I've got lots of great moments. I could go on for hours talking about this, but certainly seeing Reeves playing his bigger choppers at Glastonbury in the summer this year, that was pretty amazing, because I've known him since I was at Mute Records as an assistant engineer, which would have been 98, 99, and we've been in contact since then, so like, what's that, 20 years? And he, you know, in his life he's had peaks and troughs, and we've kind of stayed in touch, and he's given me stuff when he's been riding high, and I've given him stuff when he's been kind of down a bit and I've been up. And so that moment of seeing him on stage at Glastonbury, having the praise that he deserves, and using something that I've made that he specifically requested, was absolutely amazing. Yeah, that was a big moment. So yeah, those are two really great kind of cool moments. We never exploded, and we still haven't exploded, but it's been steady growth upwards throughout I'm trying to think how many years now. It's probably 13 years, I think, we've been doing it, which makes me feel really old.